You know, people often ask me, how did Kidz Blitz get started? Well, here's my story, and I'm sticking to it. My background was in adult ministry. I had pastored a church for about 7 years in Morehead, Kentucky after Bible college. Had a great time there, loved that. Ended up planting a church in Tampa, Florida. That church just didn't exactly set the world on fire, so we merged that with another church. That was a bigger church, so I kind of got absorbed into that. And I was an associate pastor, which is a nice gig, I got to say. Children's pastor left, and so I ended up having to jump in and try to hold it together until they could find somebody else. Now, come to find out, that's how a lot of people get into children's ministry, but I didn't know that. And so it kind of became a crisis for me. You know, it's like, okay, is this what I'm going to do? I mean, you know, I never thought about that before. My background was in adult ministry, and now I'm teaching kids. And, you know, I had to kind of figure out if this is what I believe God was directing me to do. Now, two things kind of settled it for me, and I got to give credit where credit's due. I heard Willie George and Jim Weidman at a workshop, kind of a conference workshop in Miami, Florida, and they made two statements that really stuck with me. One of them was that Jesus had a children's ministry. I never thought about that before, but they took me through the book of Matthew in particular and showed me how Jesus several times called kids to himself and directly ministered to kids. And then they also showed me out of Matthew chapter 10 and verse 42 that there's a special reward for people who work with kids. And those are two things that really kind of got me that I hadn't thought about before. So anyway, I thought, okay, I made the leap, and this is what I'm doing. I'm going to give it everything I've got. And so that's how things kind of got started with me in children's ministry. So I found myself running children's church. Now, I had experienced what I now call CMSS, Children's Ministry Shock Syndrome. That's when you think that what works in adult ministry will work in children's ministry. Come to find out, it doesn't. So my very first experience, I had my podium set up. I was ready to preach the Word of God to the kids. First Sunday, running children's church. First kid came in, sat down, looked up at me and said, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Pastor Roger. I'm here to run children's church." And he said, "Well, we don't want you. We want Brother Larry." And he stood up and he marched out of children's church. Now, I did not, at that point, did not even know enough to know you can't let a kid just walk out of children's church. I didn't know I had to, secure the premises. Mother brings him back in a few minutes, and she's a little disgruntled with me that I let her son go. So anyway, I began to realize this is a whole new kind of deal. But here's the day when I really realized this is a whole new experience working with kids. So all this became kind of the fabric that was woven into me to start Kidz Blitz a little while later. So I'm teaching a lesson, and all of a sudden there's a disturbance. I can see it in my peripheral vision on my right side. And then, I didn't want to stop my brilliant lesson to take care of this, but I saw one of my workers going over there around the back to stop this thing. And I thought, all right, they're going to handle this. Well, I then noticed the disturbance getting a little bigger. Another worker goes over there. So I finally, and I'm disgruntled by this, I have to stop and I say, all right, what's going on? Now, without seeing the humor in it, one of my workers says this to me. "Well, the problem is that Billy here took Bobby's Bible because last week Bobby took Billy's offering money." And it was at that moment I realized that everything I pretty much learned about ministering to adults was out the window. This was a new ball game, because in all my years of ministering to adults, that never happened. Never one time did Mrs. Anderson, steal Mr. Jones's Bible because last week Mr. Jones got her offering money the week before that. Never happened. And so I began to realize this is a whole new deal. I further began to realize this is a new deal when I brought in some really good musicians to lead praise and worship. And they were leading praise and worship, and I began to realize kids didn't care. They didn't care of the quality of the musicianship of what I brought in. And I began to realize, little by little, that children's ministry, at least for me, was all about interaction. How could I get kids involved, get them to participate, and learn at the same time? So it was less than a year later. Wasn't a long time. I was not a children's pastor for a long time, but I resigned to take what became Kidz Blitz on the road, this high interactive experience for kids and families. And it was tough. You know, first 2 years were really, really difficult. I had 4 girls at the time. We were trying to, survive. And it was a crazy time. I had an old Aerostar van that didn't even have air conditioning that worked. And for 2 years, it was tough. And just went all over, went around Florida, did a lot of events in Illinois, Indiana. About 2 years into that, then Ken Dovey came on board, who became kind of the co-creator of this, helped me come up with ideas and really shape this thing and try to see if this event would just gel. It was beginning to get traction. We just wanted to do something that was a kind of a big bang event for parents and kids together. Just tried a lot of stuff. People sometimes think I'm all creative. Well, not that I'm all that creative, really. I just tried a lot of stuff that didn't work. And so I was just willing to do that. I was willing to try a lot of stuff that would crash and burn to find a few things that would work and then integrate those into the event. So it began to grow. After about the second year, it began to explode. We were then able to bring on somebody else to do events. And so throughout the time in Kidz Blitz, now we started Kidz Blitz way back, 1996, been going about 23 years now. And it just, sometimes we had 2 directors, sometimes we've had 3 directors, but we've had 2 or 3 that whole time, except for the exception of about the first 3 years. And so anyway, God just began to bless. Now, some interesting things happened along the way. About the 4th year into it, and I began to say to people, because they would ask me, what's Kidz Blitz like? And I didn't know what to say. I would say, well, it's kind of like a Nickelodeon style event. Now, to this day, I have never seen Nickelodeon's Double Dare either on TV or anything. I don't watch that because I don't want to be tempted to steal ideas and all that, so I just don't do that. But I did put that line on a run of posters, and it was on the website for just a little while, Nickelodeon style event, because I was trying to explain what this event was like. Well, then one day I get a letter, 2001, get a letter from the lawyers of MTV. MTV, didn't know this, owned Nickelodeon. And it was basically a cease and desist letter, quit using that phrase, Nickelodeon style event. Well, by that time I'd already quit using it. And so I wrote them back and said, hey, we're not doing it anymore anyway. But I thought it was the coolest thing that we got a cease and desist letter from the lawyers of MTV. So I framed it, put it on my wall. It's still on my wall today. And so anyway, but a lot of things happened. Now, I have one big regret, and that is in the early days that I didn't start a journal. If I had known I was going to be doing this 23 years later, I would have started a journal and talked about, and written down just places I've been and things that have happened, because a lot of really interesting things have happened along the way. Some of them I can't talk about, but some amazing things happen. So God has been good to us. We began to divide the event in half, because even though Kidz Blitz was started as a family event, people would ask me sometimes to do a kids-only event. Sometimes a big church would bring me in on a Sunday morning, and they would just had kids. So I had to kind of divide the two. So Kidz Blitz became the kids-only event. Fam Blitz became the parents and kids event together, and so that's how we still have it today, Kidz Blitz and Fam Blitz. So anyway, we're still kicking. We've traveled over 1 million miles in the last 23 years. We circle the globe about 1.5 times every year, been to over 40 denominations. Our best estimates, or conservatively about 100,000 people have made first-time commitments to the Lord in Kidz Blitz or Fam Blitz events. And so we're very glad about that, very humbled by that. And we're just excited to see what God's going to do next.